There's a lot of really fun, affordable, and collectible Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games available out there, and you can play them all on your television using your Nintendo GameCube with the Game Boy player on the GameCube. Here's the GameCube and a look at the top of the camera. This thing down here is the Game Boy player. It sits beneath your GameCube, and it's quite well designed if you ask me. I think that's pretty cool. And you take a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance game and simply plug it into the bottom, lock it into place. Don't forget to insert the boot disc. Important fact, if you buy one of these used, make sure that it comes with the Game Boy player startup disc, because the hardware will not do it by itself. The Game Boy player works with this thing. So you put it in there. Unlike the Super Game Boy for SNES, the Game Boy player on GameCube requires software. Since I don't like taking my stuff apart after it's already assembled, I'll use this picture on the startup disc to show you what the Game Boy player looks like by itself, but you're never going to use it by itself. It needs a friend to work. When you're done playing a game, you can use this little eject button here to pop out the Game Boy cartridge. The Game Boy player for the GameCube has an advantage over the Super Game Boy for the Super Nintendo in that it will play Game Boy Color games, like Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. It plays old school Game Boy games, and of course, Game Boy Advance. It has a number of cool features and is perfect for those who want to enjoy the audio on a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance game because it outputs it in stereo from the GameCube. So while it doesn't really improve the visuals that much, it does make the games sound better. The manual tells you how it works. There's a high-speed port connector, there's accessory slots, and an external extension connector. While there's many Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games that are best played on the actual Game Boy or Game Boy Advance hardware, there's a number of them that benefit from being played with an actual controller, like the GameCube controller, which is a really nice controller. If you have a large collection of Game Boy and or Game Boy Advance games, this is the perfect accessory for your GameCube. They're extremely easy to find and affordable. I bought the entire GameCube and Game Boy adapter for $35. In fact, I think the Game Boy adapter is the best reason to buy a GameCube, because it allows you to play so many awesome games on the big screen. It does not work with the Nintendo Wii, however. Keep that in mind. It's no surprise this thing doesn't work for the Wii. These days, they would rather you download games and pay for them again, even if they were released 20 years ago. But if you're into used games or already have a huge library of Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games, this thing is the way to go. The video looks great, and the audio sounds even better. Frequently you'll find the handling characteristics of a game are changed if you're used to playing it on the Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP. The larger screen area gives the impression that the game is moving faster, which makes it feel like the controls have some delay if you're used to playing them on a smaller screen. But on the whole, it works very well. Some games are better than others. The racing games look really nice on a large screen, like Mario Kart Super Circuit. We've been watching some of the options that the Game Boy player gives you. Some silly ones like changing the background, but you can also add a filter effect and change up the button assignments. Here's a look at F-Zero for the Game Boy Advance. One handy feature they give you is the ability to change game cartridges or game packs without turning off the GameCube. You pull up the menu using the Z button on the GameCube controller. You pop out the old game pack and insert a new one like a Game Boy Color game cartridge or game pack or thing that plays game. In short, this thing is extremely simple and easy to use. Maybe not as simple as the Super Game Boy, which was just a plastic adapter for the Super Nintendo, but this one plays more games. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some Masters of the Universe to play on my GameCube using the Game Boy player. Let's watch this one more time because the eject button is so cool. Wow.